Screen, Melissa.
Yeah, that'd be great. So just really quickly, guys, thank you so much for joining today's session. We are going to hear from Kira McCardle from Calmac Ferries and Ben Nielsen from Havas. And we're going to do a quick session today, just a quick whistle stop hour session on the roles of client and agency side and an exploration of what this entails. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'll leave that for our brilliant speakers. We will take questions at the end, so please do think of questions, throughout the session, and we'll have some time at the end to ask these to our speakers. But yeah, without further ado, I will just pass on to Kira and Ben. I'm just gonna spotlight you guys for everyone so that you're on screen.
Thanks, Melissa, and thank you so much for everything you've done to facilitate this session. It's great to have you do this for us, so it's been really nice. We thought we would introduce ourselves to begin with. So my name is Kira, as Melissa mentioned. I'm marketing manager at Caledonia McBrain, aka Calmac Ferries. So that's the biggest ferry operator in the UK, and we serve all the islands on the west coast of Scotland. Just a bit about me. I studied a master's in international fashion marketing at Glasgow Caledonian University, then went into some fashion marketing roles at companies like JD Sports and the Hut Group before recently making the move into more of the travel and tourism space. So as marketing manager at Calmac, I look after all things branding, content and marketing, including a team of 3 across campaigns, social media and activations, as well as management of various agency relationships. Yeah, so that's me. I'll pass over to Ben.
Thanks. Thank you. And yeah, I'm Ben. So I'm an art director at Havas Links. So I don't know if anyone knows about Havas Links, but it's part of the Havas Collective, which is this worldwide marketing agency. And Havas Links is just the healthcare specific side of that. So currently based in Manchester, living in Glasgow right now, but having to move next week. So yep. And yeah, I started I went to college, did sort of communication design, and then worked at Made Brave for 4 years, sort of jumping up, and then recently just got the role with Havas Links. So, yep, all good.
Thanks, Ben.
Yep, so just who we are and what this really is. So, this is a new event series held by the Marketing Society, and it's aimed at first rollers and future leaders as well. And we're just here to give sort of some practical advice and really making the obvious obvious. So, I know when Cara and myself, when we were starting out, there was some stuff we wish we knew before going into our separate industries. And so, we're just here to burst that information onto yourselves, and hopefully, that'll help you going into your future roles.
Thanks, Ben.
So
So, oh, sorry, you go.
I was good. So the talk today is basically between client side and agency. So I work in agency, and Kiara's in client side. So the conversation today is just to talk about the roles within both of them, and I'll let Kiara talk about clients first.
Yeah, thank you. So, we just wanted to give a kind of brief definition. I know that might seem really basic and obvious, but I think for me, when I was a student, certainly I wouldn't have necessarily known, and maybe at the beginning of my career, the difference between a client company and an agency. So, when we say client, we mean any company that's sole purpose isn't marketing and advertising. So, a company with a kind of different purpose, for example, Calmac Ferries, our purpose is to serve travel operations for the islands in Scotland. So yeah, a client company with an in-house marketing team. My experience in this area is I've kind of throughout my career mostly worked in client companies. I briefly worked at a small agency when I first graduated, but since then I've only ever worked client side. So with a beauty retailer, JD Sports, as I mentioned, a company called the Hut Group in Manchester, and now Calmac.
And yeah, agency side is everything Kara said, the opposite. So yeah, we work with all different types of clients. There's a lot of variety. So it's just basically clients come to us with a bit of an idea, and we have to expand that and sort of bring that into fruition and bring that to an execution. So yeah, they feel different, but they're kind of the same once we dive into it a little bit further. And if we go to the next slide, there's a list of clients on the left hand side and agencies on the right hand side. And this is just Scottish focused at the moment. So I've tried to pair these up with which agencies work with which clients and vice versa. So on the left, we've got First Bus, they work with the likes of Made Brave. We've got St James's Quarter, which work with Studio LR. Edinburgh Gin, Bright Signals, Co Fibre with Guy & Co, ScotRail with Dentsu, and Visit Scotland work with Union as well. And this is a bit more of a global perspective, and predominantly London as well. So as I said, Havas or Havas Links work with healthcare. So our main client's AstraZeneca. Saatchi & Saatchi, which is a big London agency, they've just won John Lewis. So they do stuff like the new John Lewis ad that came out at Christmas time. That was a new acquirer. Koto, which are branding agency. So they create brands rather than advertising themselves. So they created the brand. Skyscanner did all the brand for that and everything. And then Uncommon, bit of a smaller size, but they still do great work and obviously work with Nike. Sidley Global, Hyundai is one of their clients, and Ogilvy, started by a Scottish guy, which is amazing. The most famous work is Dove and bringing in that real beauty side. So just a bit of an overview of our agencies in worldwide and London.
Yeah, I suppose just a point on the client side is this just shows across both Scotland and more globally the variety within client organisations. So obviously you've got everything from kind of motoring to beauty to travel to medical here. And another point I want to make is that no matter the size of a client company, obviously Nike, for example, is going to have a massive in-house marketing team, but they will always still work with agencies just for a fresh perspective, set of ideas, to inject a bit of creativity sometimes. So there's always that client and agency relationship there.
And we tried to put some gifts in here to make this slightly interesting. And yeah, it's commonly referred to like the dark side and the light side. So people say when they go to the agency, they're going to the dark side of it. And when you're in client side, it's a bit more like the force and everything. And sometimes people swap a lot of the time for various reasons. So yeah, if you hear that, now you know why.
I know, well, I hadn't heard that before Ben told me, so I don't know if it's like an agency only thing.
Probably, so yeah, today's talk is just an exploration of agency and client career paths. So just a pre-warning, there's a lot of lists and we've tried to make the lists as engaging as possible.
Yeah, so I'll kick off with talking about client roles. And I've done that by splitting it up into firstly creative and content roles. So by creative and content roles, I just kind of mean roles which require creativity, strong communication skills, a keen understanding of brand identity and messaging. So these sorts of roles across the board will focus on things like content, storytelling, and building relationships with audiences and partners to drive marketing objectives. So as you can see, there's a whole host of roles here. We've only got a short amount of time, so I'll try and run through these dead quickly. Obviously, you have Google to hand if you ever want to learn more, or you can just message me afterwards. But social media, that's all about kind of posting on social, driving reach, following, engagement. Influencer marketing, it's about using people your audience trust to drive advocacy for your brand or reaching new customers by leveraging different influencer audiences. Content marketing can involve a whole host of things, but really I would see that as coordinating a consistent content kind of strategy across channels to ensure that there's one key message being told to your customer and it's landing with impact. Brand design can include everything from graphic design to kind of photography and video shoots. It's just about maintaining brand image and guidelines, ensuring consistency in how your brand is presented at all times. Campaign management is another coordination role. So that would involve identifying opportunities to drive your brand's objectives across above the line and below the line channels. So kind of working across multiple channels to drive those objectives. Copywriting kind of does what it says on the tin, just developing your brand's tone of voice in all things written content. Events is about engaging your community and driving advocacy of your brand, reaching new audiences through relevant events again. And PR, working with the press to drive positive sentiment around your brand and manage any negative stories out there, which can be really important, especially for certain companies. Community management, that will differ across different types of companies, but it's specifically designed to engage your community across channels and make them feel heard, considered, and part of something. I think this is more important for some brands than it is others, but it is becoming increasingly important in today's kind of digital world where people have more connection with the brands that they buy from or follow or whatever, and they are expecting more engagement and response from those brands. Finally, brand partnerships. So that's anything involving working with third-party brands on various objectives. And again, it can look very different depending on the company. So, for example, when I worked in the brand team at JD, it would be all about working with the brands that they stocked, such as Nike, Adidas, Puma, to drive our joint objectives. Now that I work with CalMac, it's about kind of working with brands that align to our identity and proposition as a brand. So maybe Visit Scotland or more local tourist bodies across the islands, or perhaps ScotRail. So I then split things into data-driven and analytical roles. So by that, I would mean roles involving leveraging data and analytics to inform strategic decision-making, optimizing campaigns, and enhancing the customer experience. So these sorts of roles require skills in data analysis, performance tracking, and strategic planning to drive measurable results and achieve marketing objectives. Just a disclaimer, I am very much skewed towards content and creative. I have worked very closely with all of these sorts of roles in the past, but they're by no means my forte. They're very, very important roles, but just apologies to anyone who does work in these areas if I don't do them justice. So CRM, that's all things email marketing, push notifications, app messaging. Again, this will vary depending on what sort of company you work for, but it's a very technical role involving audience segmentation, and you really need to be on top of your stats to understand how things are working and how you can target things based on things you learn about your audience. Similarly with paid media, that can refer to anything from Google display ads to Meta or Snapchat or TikTok advertising. And again, that requires really close attention to data and stats to drive performance. Affiliate marketing, that again can look very different in different companies. In my experience working with affiliates in more kind of retail space, it would involve working with discount partners. So for example, Money Supermarket or Unidays on driving kind of specific discounts, and again, leveraging data and insight to figure out when you push certain discounts and to which audiences and things. Digital experience and e-commerce, I'll just kind of bundle together. So that's all things digital experience, as you might imagine. So just running the website, working with the content team to keep things fresh, using Google Analytics to understand page performance and drive conversion, keep load times down, and so on. Insights is more of a kind of catch-all role. So that's all about taking all the rich data available to you in a business and converting it into valuable insights that can actually be used by marketing teams and even teams within the wider business to make informed strategies and decisions for the company. SEO, so that's search engine optimization. So that's all about optimizing web content so that it ranks well on search engines, which is a great way to capture new audiences or drive retention, I suppose, too. Interesting thing about SEO is it's becoming increasingly important for other channels, not just web. So social media, for example, I'm sure a lot of you might use TikTok or Instagram to search things these days rather than jumping straight to Google. So you really have to consider SEO when constructing social strategies too. And I suppose that just kind of enforces the point that while I've split things into kind of data-driven and analytical and creative and content, they're very much interdependent, and any creative and content role, you will still have to be quite analytical and data-driven, and same with any sort of data-driven roles. So for example, if you work in paid media or CRM, you will have to have a level of creativity because content is driving a lot of what you do too. Finally, UX, so that's roles like user experience designer, user experience researcher. So that's all about optimizing your site for the user. It can involve qualitative and quantitative testing. And yeah, it's such an amazing role. I wish I was more technically savvy to understand more about it, but I've seen UX designers do amazing things, like even just change the color of a certain CTA on a checkout page, and it increases like conversion rates by crazy amounts. It's all about just looking at how the user interacts with your website and adapting and optimizing to kind of drive your objectives. So it's a really interesting role.
There's a crazy story about user experience. So Rory Sutherland, he works at Ogilvy, but they got briefed by Skyscanner on how to basically increase sales in Skyscanner. And he's a psychologist, so he actually looked and found out that it's too easy. So when people search on Skyscanner, it comes up instantly. So it feels like there's no gratification or work. So his answer was to delay the search by 15 seconds with a wee toggle. And that's
Oh,
the
wow.
experience. And all that does is it makes you, the user, feel like this thing is working for you, and actually it comes up at an instant, and it shut up sales drastically just by one tiny little change.
That's amazing. I really love UX, and as I say, I wish I worked closer with it because it's such a cool channel. I suppose, yeah, you're right, Ben. It does involve like an element of psychology, which is just so interesting.
Yep.
I'm not going to talk too much about this. This was just to give an understanding of other departments within any sort of client company. So within a marketing team, you will work really closely with all of these departments, really across different objectives. And yeah, it's relevant to keep that in mind. So we've included this gift, as Ben said, we want to keep things engaging. But yeah, you might be feeling I've obviously just landed so much information your way. But also, I think it's fair to say, certainly when I was at the start of my career, just in uni, fresh out of uni, I kind of felt like this quite a lot. And maybe put it off the screen because it's making me dizzy. But when thinking about where do I go from here, I remember when I was a social media executive, kind of still quite early on, and I didn't really know, does that mean I'd be pigeonholed into social media for my whole career? Can I kind of branch out? Can I try new things? Or do I just need to? I knew I was hungry for kind of progression and taking on more responsibility, but I didn't really know what that route might look like for me or what the end goal even was. Because everything just felt so broad and open. So we wanted to give you an idea of what progression might look like within a client company too. So I split that up between these kind of arbitrary categories of creative and content and data driven and analytical. And I just kind of wanted to give a flavour of what those roles might look like. So this is by no means extensive, obviously, but yeah, I kind of put it in order. So you might move to, like, for example, a lead might be on the more junior side of those senior roles, whereas a chief marketing officer or a chief customer officer will be kind of a top dog within a company. But yeah, there's loads of routes of progression. And one thing that I would say is it's a lot less linear than I used to think. As I mentioned, obviously, when I was a social media executive, I suppose I was concerned or I was unsure about whether that meant that I would only be able to progress from there to social media manager to social media lead and very much keep in social media. But actually, my progression so far has been a total zigzag. Although, as I said, it's mostly on the creative and content side. It's kind of leaped about from social to third-party brands to customer impact, which I still don't even really know what that means, to campaigns, to now marketing manager. So never really feel pigeonholed. There's always, I think, in any given role in marketing, you're always going to build a skill set that will be relevant to make that jump. And it looks different for everyone. So I'd advise that you have a wee creep on LinkedIn and look at people that are in roles you might see yourself in and look at their kind of path there, because I bet you'll never know the kind of weird and wonderful ways people get to where they are now. And yeah, I suppose my advice would be that unless you have an absolute goal in mind, like one day I want to be social media director or head of UX, just try and keep your skill set broad at these kind of foundational stages, because it'll allow you to kind of establish what you like best and what you want from your career, but also build up a range of experience that then affords you options in your progression in your career.
Thank you. And I'll chat briefly about agency roles and how this looks. So next page. Cool. So yeah, just a brief overview. I'm not in operations. I'm from the creative side, so I will quickly go over this as fast as I can. So at the top, you have CEOs. This is normally sort of, they've either founded the company or they worked their way up to CEO, and they're just got a bit of a vision for the company and the agency and where they're going to go, who they're going to target, etc. Chief operations manager, that's someone who organizes a bit more of the day to day. So they maybe look at like bringing laptops in, looking at different office spaces, etc., working with traffic. You have head of new business. So that's a person that works basically with client and accounts to find new business and think of avenues to go down. You obviously have your traditional HR, finance, and traffic manager. This is one I was not aware of, but this is the person that looks at the schedule going forward and all the work that's coming in, and then tries to pick out who's going to work on each project across that project timeline. So they'll work with the creatives and creative directors closely to move things around. Next, so yeah, creative. It's quite interesting what Chiara was saying, where if you're a designer in an in-house team or a client side, then you might be able to span into photography and do sort of different things that way. Once you get into an agency, it becomes a bit more specialized. It depends on agency size, but especially in the role I'm in now, an art director would rarely go and do a design job or an art working job. They're employed for their role specifically. And even if there comes to a point where they're under resourced in something else, they will just hire another designer rather than get you in to do that job. So quite a different way of working, but still it's very rewarding. So yeah, at the top you have CCO, Chief Creative Officer, kind of similar to CEO in that standard, but they're just looking at the agency's work as a whole. And then you have the executive creative director, which manages the creative directors, creative director, which sort of manages the people below. So it'd be the art directors, copywriters, designers, art workers, etc. And they're really the control of the creative work and the essence itself. So DCD, Deputy Creative Director, is just a step below that. So that's basically just an interim jump up to CD. And then where it gets really interesting, I think, is an art director and copywriter. So these people are actually teamed up as a team and they will essentially move as teams. So I've found a copywriter at Havas now and we work really well together. So what might end up happening is we might jump to another agency as a team and then you progressively go like that. And you even have creative directors, which have been teams as art director and copywriter for years. So quite an interesting way of working, very collaborative. And design, so you have design director, which is obviously the top, and then you have designers and art workers. So they could be senior down to junior. And does anyone know the difference between a designer and an art worker? Cool. So again, this was new to me. So a designer is basically someone that comes up with the brand and they do a lot of the creative thinking with that, with the art worker and copywriter. But an art worker is someone that just churns out all the assets. So if you have ads or if you have billboards that you need to create, then it was the designer that comes up with the idea and then the art worker would churn them out. So different roles, but both still quite rewarding. It just depends if you're very tech savvy or idea savvy. That's the difference, I would say. Planning, also referred to strategy. So bit of a different role. Again, they're less creative and a bit more research heavy. So you can have head of planning or senior strategist and content strategist with researcher, editors, and writers. So they get the brief from the client and they do all the research they can to become experts in that client field within a short 3 months, and they distill this down into one insight to then give to the creatives. And that's the brief that we work from. So very quite unique approach, but they are the ones really steering a really interesting insight for us to get really good ideas. So we couldn't do it without them. Accounts, which is again a bit misleading because accounts I would automatically think finance, but it's not. It's client relationships. So you have a head of account management, senior account director, account lead, and account executive. So that's a bit of the progression that you can go from, and they would basically manage different clients at different levels. So the head of account management or senior account director might be speaking to the top dogs at AstraZeneca, when account leads and account executives might be speaking to clients in AstraZeneca, but at a lower level. So this is a bit of a kitchen sink diagram of how it all works. This, I would say, is actually quite a relatively small agency, which is quite crazy to think of. I know in Havas, there's 750 of us, which is a lot, and we are split into 7 different teams. So our teams might look a little bit like this as well now. But yeah, so you can see sort of who's managing who. So you have the CCO at the top left, how they're managing sort of ECDs, head of designs, executive producers, all that sort of stuff, and how that goes right down into art director and copywriter. Not to say that we're low level, we're the one that comes up with ideas. Cool. And yeah, this is just different agencies have different things and specialities and roles that I never even knew existed before I joined. So for the likes of have us, because we're a healthcare agency and we're advertising to doctors and HCPs, we need people there that are doctors already. So then when we pitch them an idea, they're going to sign it off to be like, yep, you're not lying here. You're telling the truth, and it sounds, and it's all in the right lingo and right language for doctors to understand. So quite an interesting speciality there. So we work with, there's 4 or 5 doctors within the agency, which are chief medical officers, scientific directors, and medical writers. So medical writer is different to copywriter, because copywriter comes up with a creative idea, but then they'll speak to medical writers to make sure it's the right language. Quite interesting. And production's just like a whole different kettle of fish. You can get production agencies and they come with a whole massive list of job titles. So you can get director, DOPs, producers, etc. So if you want to go on the production side, I'd recommend looking into that because it is quite good as well. Yep. So no matter what the role, there's like endless amount of progression within an advertising agency or brand agency or any type of agency. So yeah, similar to client roles as well.
Thanks, Ben. So we just wanted to talk about a bit about how clients and agencies work together, and that's often around a brief that's put out by the client. So I just thought from client side, I would talk about our experience of how that process might look. So step one, we establish the need. So that's all about analysing data and insights related to your customer behaviour or needs or business objectives, even competitor activity, sorry. So you use that to define clear goals and objectives for a given campaign. And you ensure at this stage that you understand your target audience, so demographics, interests, behaviours, preferences, things like that. You then tailor the brief to address the specific needs and objectives that you've identified. And that leads on to step two. Step two is crafting a clear and concise brief. So at the heart of this has to be clear objectives, so outlining specific goals that the marketing campaign aims to achieve. So whether that's conversion, driving sales, brand awareness, increasing web traffic, that needs to be really clear, especially when you're briefing that out to an external agency so that they know what you're after and they can provide a response or a proposal that aligns to that. As part of that, you want to provide detailed insights about the target audience, because again, that'll be key for any agency to develop a strategy and creative concepts. You provide your brand guidelines so that they're familiar with your brand values, your look and feel, just all things kind of visual identity. And key thing is to provide a clear budget and timeline. So clearly define that any budget constraints and any project timelines that you need to work to so that the agencies can propose realistic solutions. And finally, I would suggest that always be open to creativity within a brief. So don't be too kind of tight in what you're briefing, because the whole point of on client side working with an agency is to get that injection of creativity or a fresh pair of eyes. I think sometimes when you work client side and you're always working on one brand, you know that brand inside out, you think you know your customer inside out, but sometimes you need to take a step back and allow agencies to think outside the box and propose innovative ideas that align with your objectives in your target market, because while they might not work for you, I think thinking outside the box can be what leads to some really amazing work that ultimately achieves your goals. So step three is then, once you put that brief out to market, you'll have hopefully various responses from different agencies, which you'll then review and use to choose the agency that you'd like to work with. So while doing this, it's important that you're fair and objective. You might have worked with an agency that you liked before, or you might have heard something about another agency that you're not too keen on, but try and be as objective as possible, and also try and put yourself in your customer's shoes. Think about your audience and try and remove any sort of personal opinion or bias, because it's not about you, it's about the customer. And I would also say consider factors like agency culture and team experience when reviewing any responses to this. So look for a response that displays any qualities that you value in your team or your colleagues yourself, because ultimately you're going to be working with these people. That's the key kind of nature of this working relationship, is that it is a relationship. So if you value passion, creativity, collaboration, professionalism, for example, look for that in how these responses are crafted. And yeah, finally, just choose an agency that not only meets the requirements of the brief, but also demonstrates a wider understanding or an alignment with your brand's purpose, values, and objectives. So then step 4 is about working together. So again, as I mentioned, the relationship between client agency is really what's key in it driving any project. So make sure you focus on building that relationship, you build that trust. It's really, really important. And to do that, I would say prioritize communication. So whether that's having weekly meetings or making the time to have in-person catch-ups, which I find really helpful just to get more of that kind of social interaction and personal relationship with the people at the agencies you work with. And schedule regular updates on progress, challenges, milestones, agree on feedback lead times from the start, just so that everyone's on the same page and there's no worry of kind of changing goalposts. And when you are feeding back, make sure you're honest, you're firm, you're fair, but you're clear. But I think, yeah, it can be tempting to get carried away with an agency's creativity, but ultimately you need to be the anchor that reins them in a wee bit as the client, because you know what's needed. Yeah, I would definitely say that. And finally, be clear about any budget tracking. I think sometimes projects can fall down because I think either the client assumes that the agency is looking after budget and keeping on top of it, or the agency assumes that the client knows where we are with the budget. And then I don't know, we end up in a situation where it's kind of like, oh, I thought you knew. And I don't know, people are on different pages. So always be mindful of the budget.
Cool. And then this sounds a bit crazy, but when the brief comes to an agency, that brief can be, you know yourself, Kev, that could be like 10 pages long. It could be a really long, concise, well, not concise, but a long brief. And we, funnily enough, take all that information and start again. It sounds mental, and I don't think even Kiara realized that this is what we do, but we initially take the brief, read over it, and then we actually start to decide what the client actually needs. They'll come to us with a proposed need or what they want. And sometimes it can be as simple as some deliverables. They'd be like, oh, we need a website for this reason. And we'll actually look like, well, actually, is that the right execution for the reason you're trying to achieve? And sometimes it's not. So that's why we have to like read the brief thoroughly, understand it, but then we need to rewrite it almost, which sounds crazy. So after we actually sort of decide what the client needs, it goes down to planning, strategy, and creative directors. So they will work and they look at the brief and sort of come up with that need and do that 3 months of research just to try and get to be a specialist in that client's industry. And then once they've done all that research, they then rewrite the brief down to 1 page for the likes of myself to answer, because when the client sends it over, it's normally too much jargon for us creatives to get less excited about, and we need something that's very like concise and clear, and sort of this is what we're doing for X, Y, and Z. And really, like, even when I get a page, I will sort of jump to the insight, which is a sentence, and I will basically judge the whole brief off that, which is pretty crazy, but that's just how it works, and that's how you get sort of a lot of the creativity, and then you pitch those ideas to creative directors, which then either rein you in or try and make the idea you've got better. So, yep. And then, yep, 4, working together. And I think that goes obviously with agency internally. So we'll all work together. We'll work with planners, strategists, creative directors to come up with the best solution, but also we'll work with the clients and keep them involved in that process. So it feels like they're part of the decision making and they're on board, rather than getting sent something that's absolutely crazy and they're like, no, this is too much. So yeah, quite interesting how both sides work.
So with all that information, obviously we've said quite a bit about how things are on the client side of things versus agency. You might be thinking, how do I choose which one I might want to start a career in or move for a job in? So we thought we would look at some of the benefits for each. for both client and agency. So client side first, obviously there are loads of benefits to working client side, or else I wouldn't have worked there for so long or in that side of the space. But ultimately, end-to-end management is a key one for me. I think when you're working just for one brand and one brand only, you really get to kind of oversee projects from conception right through to execution and then to learning and evolution into something new. So you've got more control and ownership over the entire process, which can lead to a deeper understanding of the business and its objectives and your customer, but also a sense of pride and accomplishment in seeing those projects through to completion. And I suppose that leads on to brand building and strategy. When you are in-house for one company, you really have more of a say than you'd even imagine on kind of building the brand. And it's, I don't know, you've got quite a crucial role in shaping and strengthening the company's brand identity and proposition and just its kind of long-term direction, which is really useful if you're wanting to kind of develop that strategic skill set. And developing a broad skill set too. I think sometimes when you're working in an in-house marketing team for one company, you can get dragged into the most random stuff, whether it's, for example, we'll work closely with our retail team, HR, the digital team, customer experience, and it makes it really exciting that there's variety to what you're doing, but it also allows you to develop a skill set even in areas that you wouldn't have necessarily imagined and really hone your kind of base marketing skill set too if you apply it to different things. But with that said, as much as you kind of broaden your skill set, you also have the opportunity to become a real expert in what you do because you're doing it day in, day out for the same company. Again, that end-to-end management of projects will allow you to develop that deep understanding and knowledge in your area, whether it's your kind of area of marketing, for example, if you worked in social media or if you worked in CRM, or your particular industry, your market, your target market. It's really great. Collaboration and variety I've obviously touched on. We do work really closely across different departments. No week is really the same. We also work with a variety of, we can work with a variety of agencies on any given project. So it keeps the work really dynamic and engaging and also provides opportunity for kind of creativity and skill development. And finally, learning from results and strengthening performance. I suppose that ties into the first one of end-to-end management, but it's another kind of favourite one of mine because when you're working for one company, you're often pretty much overall working to one goal. Yes, your yearly objectives might change year on year, but you're there to, for example, Calmac Ferries, we're there to serve the network of islands that are on the west coast of Scotland. So when you're working to one goal, each project will kind of feed into that goal, and then you can learn from each project or campaign that you work on, analyze its performance and identify any areas of improvement, and then use that to inform how you approach the next one and drive stronger results for next time. So it's really good. I'll pass over to Ben.
Thank you. I'm also trying to avoid, I'm getting a delay. Sorry. Also trying to avoid the sun, if anyone can see, but it's beaming in just now and making me absolute beetroot. But anyway, yeah, agency side is, they're very similar, but they do things just slightly differently, and there's different benefits to both sides, 100%. But agency, I think I also did a stint as an in-house designer for a fitness manufacturer called Origin Fitness. So I do have a tiny little bit of experience being in-house, but the majority is being agency side. So with agency side, you do have this boundless amount of creativity. You're employed for your brain and your ideas, and for that reason, it's quite like completely different to what client side might be like as well. And you do get to do a bit of brand building and strategy depending on the project itself. But I wouldn't say it's as much leaning to the client side as Kiara was talking about. I think you do get a lot more ownership of where the agencies or where the company's heading, when on the agency side, you're just answering a brief. We're glorified creative problem solvers, I say. So yeah, a little bit different in that sense. It's really, really fast paced, which people love and hate, but because you're working with different briefs and clients all the time, we can have 3 or 4 briefs going at once, and you can get briefed in the morning and have to come up with an idea by the end of the day, if not the following day. Like, it can be that quick. So for some people, it can be a bit overwhelming, but others sort of thrive in that position as well. So it's quite interesting in that sense. So obviously very collaborative, and with agencies as well, you normally get like really, really nice offices, and it's this like really, really attractive thing, and people go out for pints on Thursdays and all that sort of stuff. So it's all a lure. It's all a lure to get you in. As I said, there's tons of variety. You're working with tons of different clients all the time, especially if you're commercial. You could be working on everything from drinks companies to food to cars, planes, all that sort of stuff, John Lewis. So it can be a massive variety of work depending on what agency you're in. But one of the things I love about it most is the impactfulness. A lot of people leave, this is quite crazy, but a lot of people leave an advertising agency because they feel morally responsible for contributing to like overconsumption and stuff like that. So people join and then they start seeing stats and like, this is wrong. But so that can freak a lot of people off. But my lecturer always said to me, which is quite interesting, but we have a moral responsibility to make the world a better place. Because when you think about it, we are putting all this stuff out into the world, and when it goes to the casting and lots of stuff, so we have a lot of influence in how people perceive things, and you can take that in two different ways if you like. But yeah, quite interesting, and you do have a lot of impactfulness going forward. So yeah, that's just the both of them side by side. And finally,
we just wanted to give a kind of overview of what we've gone through today, really. Obviously, it's quite far-reaching, but on client side, we've talked about different types of client companies, what a client company even is, roles within a client team, progression routes, the briefing process, the benefits.
And yeah, just it's the same with the agency side. Obviously, there's two, like they're quite different in some senses, but they are kind of the same as well. And yeah, we just work with a variety of clients. So there's a lot of crossover for both. They're both very creative. They're both extremely rewarding, and there's loads of routes for progression in both sides. And they both have their own unique benefits. It's just deciding which side, the force or the dark side, you want to go to.
Yeah, I think that as well, it's important to impress that working on one side never truly closes you off from opportunities on another. I think that's another kind of common misconception, that if you go the client route, you could never make the jump over to agency or vice versa, but you definitely can. And I think overall, despite any kind of perceived differences and rivalry, we're all just kind of working towards the same thing, and more similar than we might like to think.
Yeah, we're trying to summarize this in one GIF, and Kiara thought of this, and I thought it was great. But then I'm quite a Spider-Man fan, and I've watched all the new ones, and I thought this was good, but this is too similar. Actually, this is what it's more like. So agencies and clients, they're very similar. They're just different uniforms. They each specialize in different things, but the majority of them are actually like we're all problem solvers at the end of the day, trying to achieve one thing. So yeah, more like this, where there's tons of us, but just different outfits.
And we'll pass over to Melissa now just to give an update on what's upcoming in the Marketing Society.
Hello. Oh, there we go. I had to pop a spotlight on. Thank you so much, Kira and Ben. I think we can all agree that was a really, really insightful presentation into the different types of roles. So thank you ever so much for doing that for us. We are going to take some questions at the end, guys, so please do stick around. I just wanted to shamelessly plug a couple of other Marketing Society events, if you don't mind. So all events are available on the Marketing Society website. The link is in the slide just now. But just to quickly summarize some things we've got coming up. So we have the Trend Spotting Strategy event coming up on the 23rd of May. It's a calendar favorite. I think a lot of people really get some great experience and learnings out of these events. So in particular for this session, it's going to be held at the University of Edinburgh Business School. The session is sponsored by Essence Mediacom Scotland, and we're going to be exploring big picture trends, strategies and innovations, but specifically looking at a few things such as the clash of crises, deep fakes, bias, misinformation, but also looking at Gen X and millennials and what we call the great wealth transfer. So some really relevant and kind of upcoming topics that we're. So if anybody's interested in coming along, my email is also there. Just get in touch and we can add you to the guest list. It's free to members, which all of you guys are, which is super. So just let me know. The next First Rule Fundamentals event is on the 15th of August, and have more information on this in the coming months. But a quick summary of that session is quick wins to make you a leader. And that's going to be held with Sally Allen from Deloitte Digital and Francesca Coya from Republic of Media. So another two great speakers who are also members of the Future Leaders Advisory Group. And then finally, on the 22nd of August, we have our annual Amplify Festival taking place in Edinburgh. We're going to have our fan favourites such as the Ogilvy Lecture, the Creative Challenge, which is my favourite. So yeah, some great events coming up. Please do get involved. And hope to hear from you guys soon. There is also this thing that I would like to plug, this online platform that we are trying to get our kind of members involved in, called the Coffee House. So the Coffee House is held on a platform called Guild. And basically, guys, this is a members only virtual coffee house where we can interact with other members from across the globe. So I'm not sure if anybody's aware, but hopefully you all are. We've got different members from various different hubs across the world. I mean, like the UAE, the United States, we've got members in India, we've got members in Singapore. So people from all over the world that we can get involved with and speak about, events, trends. And it's just a safe space for people to get involved with. So QR code is there. Please do join up and sign up. We are also looking to have a first role specific forum on Coffee House. So I will send that link in the feedback email, which is coming after this event. So keep an eye out for it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm going to take you guys off Spotlight so that we can see everyone. Hang on a sec. Oh, now it's just me on Spotlight. Cool. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions for Ben and Kira, now is your chance.
Yeah, I've got a question actually. Sorry, I'm in the library right now, so there's other people around me. But yeah, could you kind of explain a little bit about the training and development, both in agency and client side, that you've received after being there?
Do you want to go first, Ben?
You go first.
Okay. I think training and development, obviously I had a brief stint at agency. I think it varies more depending on the company you're working for and how much they prioritise that. So for example, where I work now at CalMac, there's amazing training and development opportunities. It's really open to, or our company are really open to you just bringing something to them and saying, this is why I think this would help my development and why it would help the company through that. Whereas previously, in other roles, I haven't felt that much support unless it was something that directly pertained to me driving results in my role. So personally, I wouldn't say there's a split client or agency, but then again, I don't have too much experience on the agency side. So Ben, you might feel differently.
Yeah, I think it just depends what the company you work for is like. If I'm honest, I think both of them will probably have the same. If I'm obviously from creative, so if you wanted to learn a new tool, if you wanted to get into 3D and you spoke to your CEO or creative directors and said, listen, I want to learn this, it's going to benefit the company in this way, we can get this type of work and clients, then they'll happily invest that money for you to learn. But if you're working for a company that's maybe not open to that, then sometimes they can stop that progression. But I imagine in client side as well, if you pitched an idea for you to learn something or progress in that way, then they'd happily invest in you if it's going to benefit them and yourself. So it really just depends on the company, I would say.
I think that's a really important question to ask at any interviews you have, because companies will have training budgets, and it would be interesting. Obviously, they're not going to tell you the actual figure, but it would be interesting to understand at interview level what that budget looks like, how much is dedicated to that, and how much emphasis that company puts on it, and that'll give you a good idea.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other questions for Ben and Kira? Perhaps any like advice that you want to receive for your own decision making or anything along those lines?
Out of interest, is who's thinking agency or client? That would be a fun one to ask.
We do have I'm assuming we've got quite a few students on the call actually. So if anyone's making that decision at the moment or anyone's thinking of transitioning.
Yeah.
To be honest, I was thinking agency, but I didn't really know the difference too much. So this has really helped kind of clarify what's what. So now I have no idea.
Amazing. What role were you thinking?
I quite like the paid media side of things. The Meta and Instagram, Google advertising. So the data kind of as well. But with that also comes the ad creative, which is on the creative side of things as well. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
You get hybrids in
We'll see.
agencies as well, which is good. So you do get people that sort of specialize in ads management and stuff like that, but they can also become quite creative when they go into like out of home. So they might create a special build, which then becomes a whole brief in itself on how can you create the best of thing for this billboard in this space. So it can sort of cross borders when you go into a bit of both. So it's a good role to jump into.
Similar with client, when I first started in social media at JD, it was meant to be kind of just organic social media, but because things were growing, I ended up doing paid social as well as influencer too, which was really good to get your teeth into, like basically 3 roles in one, and kind of leverage both creative sides and that sort of data and analytical side too. So I think again, depending on, that's all questions to ask at interviews too, like what room is there for me to increase the scope of this role and try different things, because in certain companies there will be more scope for that.
Graham, did I see your mic come off for a second? Did you have a question? Also, what a view, by the way. Where the heck are you based?
Thank you. We're down at the CalMac offices in Gourock, so we're right at the pier. So yeah, it's not always as sunny as this, but so you need to take advantage of it when it is. Yeah, it was just a quick question. I enjoyed the section about the creative briefs from the client to the agency, and I was wondering, it's a question for Ben, is there anything the client can do to avoid the brief getting ripped up?
I'd say that like, it doesn't get ripped off. It's I think, yeah, it's hard because imagine it becomes a bit of a battle as well. Because when we pitch stuff back, it might be too far fetched, and we might lose stuff because of that reason. So I think it's hard because we're creative beings. Like we're trying to answer the brief, but we're also trying to make ourselves better. And that's where a lot of the difficulty comes, I think, because our currency is our ideas and work, right? So we need to come up with the most creative solution possible to your brief to make us look good. And that's why a lot of it sort of gets not ripped up, but we take that into consideration, but then try and bring it onto our level. So there's not much to prepare yourselves. I think it's always going to happen, unfortunately. But yeah, I think probably pitched less of a we need a website, and it's like what because a website's just an execution for an idea. So it's maybe go less execution and go more onto a bit of a wider brief, I would say.
No, thanks, Ben. Cheers. That's insightful.
I don't know if that helps. I'm quite.
No, it's interesting because from a client point of view, you give what you want from the agency, and you kind of score it on that basis.
Yeah.
So if you're kind of moving away from that, then I guess from a client, we need to respect innovation and the creativeness, so to speak, rather than follow our own score.
And it's hard as well, because if you're a marketing manager working client side, imagine your brand's your baby in a way, and like you don't want to hurt that. You don't want us to come in and pitch something crazy that affects your brand. And I feel like you might have to just be a little bit open to what we present and really look at the strategy of what we're saying rather than the idea. Because sometimes we can go in to a pitch and be like, this is an idea, this isn't the idea, but this is just a flavor of how we're going to approach this brief. And then we can work together with you to come up with the right solution. This might not be it, but this is just showing how creative we can be. So I think it's just trusting the process and trying to be involved in that decision making early on to get it to a place you want your baby to be a teenager.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thanks, Ben. Cheers.
Brilliant. Well, on that note, guys, because we are at a hard stop at past, just a final thanks to Kira and Ben. Thank you again for taking the time to speak to us all on that presentation. If anybody has any burning questions that they maybe don't feel comfortable asking just, on the call, if with your permission, guys, I'll just send your emails. And if you've got any particular questions for Ben and Kira, you can just ask them by email. They'd be more than happy to help. Likewise, anything events related, just get in contact with myself. I'm more than happy to help. And finally, this is my favorite cringe moment of the session. I need to take a screenshot. So if everyone, please, would put their cameras on. What we do is we just share it on socials, and we just, we like to promote the events and stuff to just show everyone getting involved. So Nicole, Bryony, turn your cameras on, please. That would be great. Hey, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Okay, cool. All right. So on the count of 3, I'm just going to ask everyone to say cheese. So cheese. Thank you so much. Sorry, so that's always so awkward to ask, but I have to do it. I'm sorry. So yeah, thanks again, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you at another event in the future. But thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.